Hello, everyone. It's so great to be here. Thank you so much for the introduction, Meredith. And I am excited to be presenting today over the lunchtime keynote. And having attended a number of conferences myself over the years, I understand just how important it is to keep the energy level high during a lunchtime presentation. So I'm going to be working to do that. Couple of starting notes. As Meredith mentioned, first of all, my name is Claire Bishop. I serve as the executive director of an organization called American Public Square. Our academic home is at William Jewell College, and we have offices in the Kansas City metropolitan area. Our mission as an organization is to improve the tone and quality of civil discourse by bringing people together to have fact-based civil conversations on contentious issues. The reason I bring this up is because the mission of our organization, I believe, is very well aligned with the work that you as students and educators and people participating in the Kansas Service and Civic Engagement Conference are really keyed into. You're doing this work already throughout the community. And so I'm just honored to be invited to participate in your conference this year. I want to thank the Centers for Service Learning at both Benedictine and KU who are hosting this conference, and Meredith and Kate who have been working with me to plan this and plan the entire event. I want to make a couple of quick notes too, given that we're trying to go high energy. I'd love for us to have some audience engagement. It's not my intention to just talk the entire time. I'd love to do a little bit of listening and encourage you all to participate as well. So just a heads up, a couple of things. We've got some live polling features. We've got some questions that we'll throw up for your weighing in on. And then we'll just do some good old-fashioned Q&A at the end of the presentation. I want to save some time. So there will be some times throughout this presentation that I'm asking you to get out a piece of paper or to jot down some ideas or to answer one of these interactive polls. As you're doing that, think too about how any of this might relate to questions that you have at the end of the presentation during that Q&A session. I would love nothing more than to conclude that a few minutes before our 1 p.m. stop time so that we can incorporate any questions or comments from the audience today. Sound good? Awesome. I can't see anyone. I'm a little bit like, I feel like a little Wizard of Oz-ish over here. I've got multiple screens, multiple things. This is just what happens in a keynote. I'm sure you all are in something of a similar situation. So forgive me if I'm not reading any of your physical cues. That's why I think the interactive polling is going to help us too. So first, and I know Meredith was going to help by popping some of these things in the chat. We do have a Slido poll, an interactive poll, just to answer this first question about how well are we connecting in society today? Just think about folks that you may work with, folks that you may be in class with, your instructors, your supervisors, even your family, folks that you live with or gather with over the holidays. How well do you feel like we're connecting? And I'm going to make this chat live, or this feature live. Hopefully you're able to see that if you're at slido.com and able to give us your vote. I'm seeing some interaction. So the options, if you're not already in Slido, the options, it looks like we're kind of getting a so-so. The options are, we're connecting really well today. We're connecting so-so, or we're connecting poorly. I'm actually a little bit surprised as I'm watching these results coming in. I'm a little bit surprised that I'm not seeing more people say poorly. That's been one of the biggest things I've heard in our work at American Public Square, is that it's just become increasingly difficult to connect with one another in the social sector today. We're going to move on and talk a little bit about why that is. What do we think stands in our way? I'd like to draw back to a presentation that we had last year, actually at the end of 2021, with famous author Robert Putnam. And some of you may be familiar with Putnam. He wrote a seminal book in 2020 or 2000, and just had its 20th anniversary in 2020, called Bowling Alone. And his whole premise was that, you know, the fabric that connects us as a society, the things that you as students of civic engagement and service learning are actively doing, and I applaud you in seeking out, things like participating in clubs and organizations, certainly connecting through our faith communities and social centers. These are the things that over the last 65 years or so in America have experienced a precipitous decline. And we've moved, as Putnam says, from being more of an I society to being more of a we society. Some of you may feel that may be what's driving some of your desire to re-engage or to, you know, approach your education with a view on engaging in the civic sector. The historical analysis, though, that Putnam puts together, which I think is so fascinating, is that this is not really about our economic systems or even just coming out of the midterm elections this week. Even I'm sure many of our heads are still spinning from that this week, our political systems, but in strong, resilient social networks or the absence thereof. So it is the social fabric that is fraying that keeps us from connecting as well as we might like today. I think this is another interesting stat that I popped in here that I wanted to share. 60 years ago, when Democrats and or Republicans were asked if they would prefer if their children married into the same political party, only 20%, around about 20% on both sides said, yeah, that would be the preference. When that question was asked just recently, 5 years or so ago, that number had increased to nearly 70%. So we're seeing not only in the political arena, but that bleeds into our very, you know, familial ties with one another. We want to see those ties remain strong within our political party system, but that sentiment that says, you know, we don't want intermarriage between the partisan divide to take place, that's significant, and that contributes to some of the lack of connectivity and the polarization that we've experienced in society. Here's the next poll, which I'm hoping will pop up now. I'm going to play it. So if you are in at slido.com using the code that Meredith provided, which just again is 3487099. How well do we tolerate conflict? The answers are: we have a healthy approach to conflict that enables growth. Conflict is hard but necessary. We do it because we have to. Or we've lost our ability to respectfully disagree. I'm seeing a little bit of activity here. I think you could make a case for all of those things being true, actually. So it's a multiple choice with multiple options in terms of answers. The reality of the matter is that a highly functioning society has a really robust system for processing conflict in a productive way. And as societies become increasingly dysfunctional, the ability between people who view things very differently to come to see eye to eye, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, becomes diminished. It's a problem for society. Okay, I'm seeing just here in terms of results so far, a lot of folks are saying conflict is necessary. It's hard but necessary. We do it because we have to. We've also got some votes for we've lost our ability to respectfully disagree. So it sounds like you all are feeling some of the same things that we certainly notice at American Public Square in our work. Why does violence seem more likely to occur? You know, clearly the specter, if you can't solve conflict or arrive at some peace through conversation, violence is the sort of the specter that looms after that. I mean, conversation and discourse is really our only chance to peaceably settle significant disputes. And it's a unnerving prospect to think that violence would be something that Americans would condone or see as being a natural outcropping of the current state of affairs in our society. Here's an interesting stat here on the screen. 1 in 4 Americans say violence against the government is sometimes okay. We've seen examples of that, you know, over the last several years in numerous protests and uprisings. The barrier that said that was not okay has begun to sort of erode, and all of a sudden it's seeming a little bit more acceptable in common culture to consider violence, particularly against the government. Another unnerving stat: 2 in 5 Americans, according to YouGov.com, say a civil war is at least somewhat likely in the next decade. You know, as young people who are, you know, beginning your career, who are refocused on education. Some of you may have had early careers and come back to renew your education in a different sector. But as young people who are making their way in the world, the notion that, you know, civil war may be imminent has to be something that doesn't sit right with you. That this is not the kind of world that you wish to inherit. It's a problem, and certainly for the rest of us who have been participating and in some ways contributing to the problems. You know, in our work at American Public Square, we work with a lot of students and young people, but we say the work of agreeing to disagree better with one another is important no matter your age. And it's equally important for folks of my age and older generations to re-embrace this notion that a healthy approach to conflict is an important way to engage in society. So a note here about Arthur Brooks, who wrote a recent book called Love Your Enemies. We'll talk more about this as we get further into the presentation, but I love the subtitle, How Decent People Can Save America from the Culture of Contempt. And what Arthur Brooks posits is that the key to greater unity and more progress isn't actually to agree more or to disagree less, but it is to disagree better. And that's essentially the setup here for what we'll talk about for the rest of the day, because in the work that we do at American Public Square, improving the tone and quality of discourse, one of the cornerstones of that is, you know, yes, I think we all agree that that's what we want to do, but how do we go about doing it? And what are some practical tools that we can use, that we can take out into our community, our places of work, our places of worship, and actually apply and implement to achieve better results? So that's going to be the focus of the conversation today, because I know that you all are really active in your community through the work that you're doing here, and some of you presenting on. I hear there have been some great presentations already this morning. You're already engaging, and the lack of civility or the presence of contempt, if it hasn't already become apparent to you in some of the work that you've done, it will be. You know, it's just a matter of time. This is something that is a pervasive problem. It's rampant in our culture. And so today we're going to focus the keynote on things that you can do to actively address that in your own spheres of influence. Okay, so next we're going to try to do a little word cloud. I'm really curious. I have not done this before. So again, you can use that link that you've got, slido.com. I'm going to make this word cloud poll live. I'm watching it to see, but I encourage you in 25 characters or less, just drop in thoughts about what it means to be civil in society, in conversation, just any kind of words that come to your mind. And we'll give you a couple of minutes to see if we can get a few answers populated here. I see that some folks are talking, or typing rather. Another quick thing while we're giving a little time to participate or to populate the word cloud, something I wanted to note, the midterms having just recently concluded. I think there was a lot of talk, a lot of hand-wringing about democracy ending. And as young people, maybe this was the first election that you voted in, maybe not, maybe you voted in several. But there was a lot of anticipation, I think, in the rhetoric that we saw in the media and in public sectors about democracy really breaking down. I don't know about you all, but today I'm really pleased to see that what looks like occurred in our midterm election is that, you know, the structure of our democracy has held, and that's can't be understated, the importance of that. But I think the problem still persists. The problem is that the ideas, the intention, the emotions behind our political system and our political strife and our bipartisan and polarized political system in the United States is faulty, and it needs to be repaired through a sort of resurgence of our ability to lean in across divides, to listen to one another, and to do so in a civil way. I'm going to stop this so that you all can see. I don't know if you're able to see yet that word cloud, but we're getting a lot of great participation, a lot of great words. Kind of want to give people some time. Can you all see and I can't see you, so if you nod, that's great, but I'm hoping that you're able to see the word cloud that we were creating together.
Yes.
Yes, great, I love it. I see words like healthy debate, listening to others, kindness, seeing multiple sides, mutual respect, the democratic process. I love, here someone wrote, have small talk too. You know what, that's huge, and we're going to come back to that because part of, I think what weighs on everyone's shoulders is the fact that all of this feels so very serious. And if you're not out there advocating for your beliefs and your views and your perspective in a very serious way, in a very committed way, that all is lost. And so small talk too, just the ability to connect with one another creates both bonding, which is that connection that happens between groups, as well as bridging, which is that connection that happens among different groups. Small talk and conversation just about the things that connect us is really important there. Thank you all for your participation. That's been great. I'm going to be using that word cloud feature more often because I really love it. So let's talk a little bit about what civility is. We saw what showed up in the word cloud, and here's a point where I think in attendance today is a staffer at APS, Tricia Maxfield. Tricia is the leader of our civics education initiative. So American Public Square works with students both at the high school and the college level to do project-based learning that supports them in learning some of these skills that we're talking about today, and then implementing them in their own APS style program, which typically takes place in the spring. You can learn more about APS's student programming at our website, www.americanpublicsquare.org. But I want to shout out Tricia because she's not only is she a program manager, she is a former teacher and an attorney, and she's the type of person that would put this slide together. And in fact, she is the person who put this slide together. So I want to give her a little shout out if she's here. What is civility? When you look at it, it's got a lot of definitions in terms of how it relates to society. So of or relating to a citizen's civil duties, right? Relating to the state of our citizenry, civil strife, like some of what we're experiencing today, or civil war would be in that category. Also based on civil law or relating to private rights as opposed to criminal cases. Civil cases address those types of issues. Civil also speaks to things that are involving or relating to the general public, their activities, needs, ways, and affairs. And then also, we use the term a lot, civilized, like civil society or civilized society. In some ways, that context applies to courtesy and politeness and being mannerly. And I think that that's important too. Something that we've heard sometimes at American Public Square. And some of you may feel this way when we talked about, when is violence against the government considered okay? In my activist days, in my college days, I often thought that, there was a place for violence or strong expression of beliefs, and this notion that we must be civilized is a way to quell dissent. And so we've heard that. I don't see it as such. I definitely see the role of civility as being a key enabler to allow us to functionally, effectively, productively process conflict. So that may be from now more years of life between me and as a person in my 40s leading a nonprofit organization focused in this area, and a young 20-something college student. But I think that's an important distinction to make. When we think about how does civility show up, it is the practice of being formal and polite in behavior and speech. Yes, it requires tolerance of divergent viewpoints. And that necessarily, this is an important point, tolerance of divergent viewpoints necessarily requires that you have exposure to different perspectives. So it's not just everyone agreeing on everything. In fact, lack of disagreement is not proof of civility. Civility exists when disagreement is present. So now we're gonna have a fun little game. I'm gonna ask for you all to vote on something, but I'm not gonna ask for you to do it on the poll. I'm going to ask for you to just do it by a show of hands. And although I can't see you, I think we're going to talk a little bit about why we're doing this way versus on a poll in just a moment. So the question that I want you to think about, a really deep question here, is whether French fries or onion rings are it. Okay, what is your favorite, but also just really what is the best? It's not even about just like what do you like better, but what is the best? What is the winner here? So I want you to raise your hand if you choose the first option, French fries. If you're French fries all day, every day, raise your hand for French fries. If you are an onion ring type of person, then just stay not seated, leave your hands down. You don't need to do anything. If onion rings are your jam, then don't move a muscle. And I can't see you, so I don't know what this room is. If I were Trisha, what I would say is that we're lucky we live in the Kansas City area or nearby, because we can always go to Winstead's and get the old half and half. So French fries and onion rings, that would probably be my choice, because I always want to have a little bit of everything. I can't really pick a side. That sometimes people will call that my weakness.
Claire, we're seeing about 4 people or so that looks like they're raising their hands for fries, just to give you a feel for what's going on.
Great. Okay, good deal. 4 people on the fry side. Nice to know. That's helpful. And see, so what you have done that's interesting is you have publicly acknowledged your preference for fries, not just your preference again, but your belief that fries are superior to onion rings, those who raise their hand for fries, right? That's what you did by actually me asking the question and indicating in a public sector what your preference was. What was appealing about that? Feel free to jump in if you have a thought, or maybe raise a hand and Meredith could help, see if anyone's got a hand raised and wants to make a comment. But why was that easy for me to ask you to do, probably pretty easy for you to participate in and make a decision? Anyone want to add anything there? I've got some ideas. It's because they're low stakes, right? These aren't, really critical issues. If, the world knows today that you are on the side of the fry versus the onion ring, no big whoop, right? That's not going to make much of an impact. You're probably not incredibly emotional. Now, maybe you are. I don't mean to, underplay your love of French fries or onion rings, but this is not a topic that's charged with emotion either, is it? What happens when the perspectives go deeper, however, when the stakes are raised, when those same types of questions, as is often the case in the public sector, are asking you to pick sides about topics that you feel are deeply personal? That's a different kind of question, isn't it? Let's talk for just a moment about wicked problems. Some of you may have heard the term wicked issues or wicked problems. At American Public Square, that's all we deal in. We deal in wicked problems all day long. So these are our topics, problems, subjects that cannot be fixed per se, and there is no single solution. Another characteristic of a wicked problem is that it's difficult to solve because of incomplete, contradictory, or changing requirements, maybe all three. These are often difficult to recognize, and they're difficult for our brains to process and categorize. And then finally, the notion of it being a wicked issue, it denotes the fact that it's resistant to resolution rather than being bad, a bad topic or an association with evil. That wicked notion is just like, gosh, it's like this tangled up thread that's going to take a whole lot of patience, listening, understanding to really unwind and lie out flat. And maybe that won't even ever be possible. Maybe that's not even what we're aiming for. Those are wicked issues. And society is full of issues like these today. You know this. We all know it. We see them everywhere we go. Here you see some examples of things that might be considered wicked topics. So what do we do with this? How do we go about processing these wicked issues and our conversations? How do we commit to having conversations that lead to productive ways to address some of these wicked issues? Well, one tool that we can use is something called dialectical thinking. And this is information that's coming out of Heterodox Academy, which is an incredible resource, an organization. I think it was founded by Jonathan Haidt. Trisha may correct me if I'm wrong about that, but it's a group of people who are working to foster, again, much like APS, foster some of these skill sets among our citizenry. So dialectical thinking is essentially the opposite of all or nothing thinking. It's both and thinking. So here's where we get a chance. If you've got a sheet of paper, maybe just grab your phone and write out a little note on your paper. But I want to do a quick exercise. And this, again, is something that would be wonderful to think about, too, in terms of anything you might like to talk about in our Q&A period. These might be topics that we can bring up or address in that period as well. But make a note after thinking for a moment on your sheet of paper that has an example of a topic with which you have personal experience. It could be drawn from that prior slide, some of those examples of wicked issues, or something else that you've just found meets those criteria and is challenging. Go ahead and jot that topic down. I'm gonna give you just a moment to do that. Take a drink of my coffee here. Do a time check too. Okay. What makes the topic challenging? And what makes it challenging to think, not just about how you think over in this red circle on the left, but how another person thinks. It's totally outside of your head. So I think I'm not going to get this quote quite right, but I remember a quote that really resonated with me years ago when I read it. It was something to the effect of, why is it that we think that the opinion in our head is the only thing? You know, you got to understand that your beliefs are based on your opinions, your values. Yes, they're very valid, but they don't mean that someone completely outside of your experience with a totally different set of beliefs and values and opinions, it's not negated by the fact that you believe one thing. So how do we get from that, I'm in this red bubble, how I think, this other person's in their bubble of how they think? How do you get to a place where you're thinking about it from multiple perspectives? Some of you may know this guy, Steven Crowder. He's got a show, Louder with Crowder. He often goes to campuses and engages in rabble rousing to the effect of change my mind. Sometimes it's about, rather frivolous topics like here on this screen. And sometimes it's about, some of these more wicked issues. But I love the context, and the setup there, because it is important to think about changing your mind. So you've got your topic that you wrote down, hopefully something with which you have some personal experience. What's your perspective on it? A statement about your values or your belief as it relates to that topic. And then think about, why is it that your choice is correct? That's probably not so hard. Why is it that other people are wrong about this? People with which you do not agree, why are they wrong? Think a little bit about what you could say to convince someone of your opinion. What would you say? And then what would not work to convince someone of your opinion? What would things, what are things that you've heard that are like, ooh, that's probably not something that is going to help make this case at all? Think about those things for the other side, for someone who's thinking about it in that other red bubble, how another person thinks about it. And then lastly, what if we could convince everyone to think the same thing? Like you've got something you feel strongly about, you've written it down on this piece of paper. What if everyone shared that viewpoint and that was just the end of the story? Would that be a happily ever after? Or what would be gained in that, and what might potentially be lost in that? So as we think about dialectical thinking, there are some things that we know it is more likely to produce when you're willing to try to get out of your own head, understand how others are thinking about it, and here are some of the benefits. You can find more effective solutions. We can just get along with each other. We can increase inclusion, empathy, and justice. We can be more persuasive. We can facilitate dialogue. This can help us understand one another better. I like to think about dialectical thinking as being really important in a number of different ways. And one is I'm, as I mentioned, in my 40s, been married for 20 years. So a marriage is a great place to practice some of these types of things, right? And I just want to share a personal story about why I, pursue work at American Public Square and am as committed to the mission as I am, which is that after the 2016 election, in my own household, my husband and I had very differing opinions and beliefs about the way things should have gone or were going. And we had the opportunity to start hashing some of those out. And because we share a foundation of mutual love and respect for one another, we were able to do that in a way that was growth inducing for both of us. I think we both grew as a result of that. But I've also had a lot of experience in a healthy approach to conflict in a team dynamic. So, you all may be in the course of your studies working in teams, but most certainly if you're already in the workforce, as you join the workforce, you're going to be working in teams with your colleagues, your coworkers, with partners. The ability to really process conflict in a healthy way is the thing that makes teams highly productive. And that necessitates the presence of diversity and thought to begin with. So when you're building teams, you want teams that think about things very differently. And then you want to build a culture that enables yourself and each other, one another, that team, to really explore those areas of conflict and use them as an impetus for growth, as opposed to a presence of shutting down and extension of dysfunction throughout the team. And I just want to share a resource that has been really formative to me. A guy named Patrick Lencioni, who's written a lot of business and leadership books. I'm drawing on some of his work from a book he wrote that I really enjoyed and found a lot of practical benefit from, the 5 dysfunctions of a team. So as we think about dialectical thinking and the way that we approach these conflicts, they're necessary because, as we know, as we saw in looking at the wicked issues, they're not just going to be solved overnight. It's not like everyone's just going to shake hands and agree to disagree on things. We got to get into the kind of that messy middle spot, and we got to develop the tools personally to show up in those places in a mind state that says, I'm willing to listen, I'm willing to understand, I'm willing to grow here. And that's the kind of mindset shift that really helps us to take it from, just a brick wall of disagreement to let's approach this productively and start coming up with some compromises and some solutions. So what actions can you take to demonstrate dialectical thinking in your lives? I want this discussion to feel practical and helpful to you as you take this information out into the communities that you're serving. So think about what it was like to come up with the pros and the cons of your issue. Did you have a hard time with arguments for one side? Look at the reasons why dialectical thinking by its very nature is difficult. Do any of these reasons resonate with you? For example, was it difficult to acknowledge negative things about issues or people that you care about? Was that part hard for you? It can be hard. And going through the process of coming up with different arguments, as we just did you think about any of those arguments differently? Did any of those kind of create a little aha moment for you? Is there a position that you might be willing to listen more to another side of an argument there? Did something spark like a curiosity that you might be willing to explore? And then how often do you read articles in the news that reflect dialectical thinking versus all or nothing thinking? There are not a ton of examples of this type of thinking in media coverage today. I want to shout out a resource, All Sides, which is a great media organization that also ranks our mainstream media by their affiliation or their kind of position on the political spectrum, and provide access to sort of multi-perspective views on these issues. So that kind of a resource is a great place to go to think about how you can expose yourself to media and viewpoints that may help you stretch and expand your own. Next up, and quickly, I'm going to go through this quickly because I do want to stop in just a few moments and open up to any questions and have a little more conversation. But here's a nice model that you can use that helps understand how do we interact in a civil fashion when we don't agree on a topic. And you can use the acronym R. It stands for assertion, reasoning, and evidence. So the assertion piece is, it's a simple statement. Homework is a waste of time would be a good example. And then, so we're not going to necessarily go through this exercise because, like I said, I want to kind of get to the end so we can talk through some of this a little bit. But something that you could do is work on an assertion. What would be an assertion that you'd make? And it could be frivolous or it could be deeper. I like the example, homework is a waste of time. I don't think there's anyone here in this room that would agree with that statement. But then next up, reasoning. This is the because part of your argument. So this is where you're saying, here's my why behind it, right? So every good argument is going to have an assertion, it's going to have reasoning, and then importantly, not to be skipped, is evidence, right? So evidence is supporting reasoning, and most often a good type of evidence is an example. And here you can see in each of these examples, we've got some examples of the evidence. So, and it's highlighted, you can read, for example, homework is a waste of time because it takes time away from other activities that are more important. For example, we end up doing worksheets of math problems instead of getting outside and getting fresh air and exercise. So here's another way, if you're looking for practical ways to engage in these conversations, rather than holding someone else's feet to the fire, think about your own beliefs and then use the R model, for assertion, reasoning, and evidence to lay out your beliefs. And having a little bit of a map doesn't mean that you have to be tied to that, but it means that you've thought it through that process. Hopefully there's some emotion that comes out, because I don't know about you all, but every time I get into a situation where I'm getting ready to argue a point on something that I care about, it's like you get fight or flight feelings. You get the cortisol kind of coursing through your body, and it can be hard to talk yourself down from that. So thinking through a point of view with this lens can help you remove some of the emotion and retain some of the civility in those conversations. So again, this is just a tool to use. And I'll say this here, we're going to go on our next, and our last slide is a social media challenge that I'd like to ask each of you to take. But first, something that, as we take this program into schools and out into the community, something that we get asked a lot is how I understand why this is so important to do. I agree with the necessity. But I'm still struggling with how do I go out into the community and have these kind of conversations when it seems like everyone's so divided and everyone cares so deeply and feels so strongly about these ideas and their ideals and beliefs. Well, one of the things that I think has been most helpful, and again, I'll draw it back on the experience that I've had, in my marriage and talking through some of these issues. You're gonna, many of you potentially have the opportunity as we gather, over the holidays to get together with your family. And let's assume that you love your family members, right? And that these are people that on multiple levels. And I would suggest that those familial relationships, those close-knit relationships are often the best places to begin to practice this kind of work. Because again, the proximity is high. You have a reason to want to maintain a healthy relationship with members in your family, right? You probably love them and have some kind of care and concern for who they are as people, and recognize that even if they have beliefs that differ from yours, they're good people at the bottom of all of that. So just a quick note, from a pragmatic standpoint, because we've got the holiday season quickly approaching and the midterms just behind us, you're kind of set up in a perfect spot to begin to have some of those conversations at the family table. And that's where I'd encourage you to start. Sorry, I think I went back a little bit. So now quickly, social media challenge, and take this and put it out into your day if you wish, but in 280 characters or less, enough space for a nice little Twitter blurb. Create a social media post that urges your fellow citizens to consider engaging in dialectical thinking, increasing their participation in civil conversations over wicked topics. Or even just take it from here and finish this statement. Talking with those who disagree with you is necessary for a healthy democracy because ... Here's what I think.